The problem with ceremonial gatherings, Rex had long ago concluded, was that someone always felt compelled to make them interesting. And interesting, in military circles, generally meant stupid. Today's stupidity arrived in a transport shuttle that barely displaced enough air to warrant attention. Rex watched it settle onto the parade ground with the enthusiasm of someone observing paint dry in a vacuum. Around him, officers from a dozen coalition species milled about in their dress uniforms, practicing the ancient military art of looking busy while accomplishing nothing. The strength trials, a tradition older than most of their civilizations, had devolved into bureaucratic theater, a chance for generals to flex genetically inherited advantages and call it merit. The shuttle's ramp descended. Rex expected another Syndrome delegation, perhaps, or a Thovian observer with their insufferable record-keeping appendages. What emerged was compact. "Is that a human?" Lieutenant Kresh muttered beside him, mandibles clicking with barely suppressed amusement. It was female, if Rex remembered the briefing materials correctly. She stood perhaps 7/10 of Rex's height, built along lines that suggested her species had never quite committed to being physically impressive. No exoskeleton, no redundant musculature, no subdermal plating. She wore a simple duty uniform that did nothing to suggest martial capability. She also walked with the posture of someone who'd forgotten to be impressed by her surroundings. "Liaison Officer Chun," she announced, her voice carrying across the assembly ground without artificial amplification. "Earth Expeditionary Coordination. I'm here for the trial's observation." "Observation," Rex repeated, letting his tusks show in what his species considered a diplomatic smile. "How prudent. Your kind does excel at watching others work." A few officers chuckled. The human Chun tilted her head with an expression Rex couldn't quite parse. Amusement? Calculation? Her species had maddeningly subtle faces. "We do have a certain appreciation for learning from demonstration," she said. "It's served us well." Kresh leaned closer. "General, perhaps we should—" "The trials are about strength," Rex continued, warming to his theme. He gestured toward his ancestral warplate, displayed on its ceremonial rack 600 pounds of alloy and heritage, work with symbols of every battle his lineage had won. Endurance, the physical superiority that separated commanders from coordinators. He let his gaze sweep across her frame. No offense intended, of course. "Of course," Chin agreed, entirely too pleasantly. "My great sire wore that plate to the Vendex campaign," Rex said, "because if you were going to be insufferable, you might as well commit. 47 days of sustained combat in twice standard gravity. The weight alone would crush most species' skeletal structure." "Impressive," Chin said. She walked toward the display rack with the air of someone examining an interesting museum piece. "What's it weigh?" "Local measures are fine. 632 Tavik," Kresh supplied helpfully. "Roughly 600 of your Earth pounds." Chin circled the armor slowly, studying it from angles that suggested genuine interest rather than polite courtesy. The assembly had gone quiet. Even the Syndrel had stopped their chittering gossip. Something in her body language suggested the conversation had shifted in a direction Rex hadn't intended. "Here's a thought," Chin said finally. "I'll make you a wager, General." Rex felt his secondary hearts accelerate slightly, a physiological response to species associated with prey behavior, which was absurd. He was 3 times her mass. "I'm listening." "If I can lift that armor," she nodded toward the warplate, "one-handed, off its rack, and hold at shoulder height for 10 seconds, your officers stop treating human personnel like secretarial staff." She smiled, and there was something predatory in it that Rex's hindbrain didn't care for. "We're here for the joint operation. Might as well establish whether we're partners or pets." The silence stretched. Someone, one of the Thovian observers, made a sound that their translators rendered as scandalized whistling. "And when you fail?" Rex asked. "Then I'll personally file all your post-operation reports for the next year," Chin said, "by hand, in triplicate." Kresh's mandibles were working overtime. "General, perhaps we should—" "Accepted," Rex said, because turning down the wager would somehow be worse than accepting it, and because he was genuinely curious how she'd attempt it. Deadlift, perhaps, using leg strength and hoping for partial credit. some kind of mechanical assist hidden in her uniform? The crowd pressed closer. Word had spread with the supernatural speed that military gossip always achieved. Even the Syndrome delegation had paused their usual aloof observation to watch. Chin approached the rack. She rolled her shoulders once, twice loosening up, Rex assumed, though for what he couldn't fathom. She positioned herself beside the armor, not in front of it. One hand reached out, gripped the plate's shoulder section. Rex waited for the strain, the struggle, the embarrassing failure, and the awkward diplomatic cleanup that would follow. Chun lifted. The armor came off the rack in one smooth motion, rising to her shoulder height, as though it had been inflated with helium rather than forged from battle-grade alloy. Her arm locked straight, perpendicular to her body. She held it there, steady as orbital mechanics, while Kresh counted off the seconds in a voice that had gone slightly strangled. Her breathing hadn't changed. Her expression suggested mild boredom. At 10 seconds, she lowered the armor back onto its rack with the same infuriating ease, settling it precisely into its mounting brackets. "Acceptable?" she asked. Rex discovered his vocabulary had temporarily relocated to some distant corner of his brain, where it was having a crisis. Around him, the assembly had achieved a silence usually reserved for memorial services. He started, then stopped, because everything he'd been about to say had become suddenly, comprehensively obsolete. Chin dusted her hands against her uniform pants, though there was no dust. The gravity here is what, 0.78 standard? Comfortable. Easy to forget you're even carrying weight. She looked at Rex with those unsettlingly direct human eyes. "Should we discuss the operation protocols now, General? Or would you prefer I file some paperwork first?" In the distance, a Syndrome medic was making rapid notes on their data tablet, compound eyes wide with what Rex was beginning to recognize as vindicated alarm. He had the distinct, uncomfortable sensation that he'd just lost a contest he hadn't realized he was entering. The crowd hadn't dispersed so much as condensed, pressing inward with the gravitational inevitability of a forming star system. Rex found himself at the center of that mass, still trying to reconcile what his eyes had reported with what his understanding of biology insisted was impossible. "Explanation," he said flatly, directing the word at Chun, but also at the universe in general, which seemed to owe him one. Muscles contract. Chun offered, unhelpfully. Bones provide leverage. Basic locomotion principles, really. A karate Major Torvin, who'd served long enough to have opinions about everything, stepped forward. "The mass ratio is wrong. Your species averages, 60 to 70 kilograms? That armor is 4 times your body weight. 4.3 times, actually." Chin said, "I'm on the lighter end of operational standards." "Impossible," Torvin insisted, though his conviction wavered even as he said it. "The muscle fiber density required is higher than yours, yes." The voice came from the Syndrome delegation. Dr. Ixith, their chief medical officer, skittered forward on 6 legs. Data tablet clutched in her primary manipulators. Her compound eyes reflected the parade ground lighting in fractal patterns. "I've been trying to explain this to Command for 3 months. No one listens to the exobiologist." Rex turned his attention to her, grateful for anything resembling a rational framework. "Explain." Ixitha's mandibles clicked in what her species used for resigned amusement. "Human muscle tissue operates at approximately 60% greater efficiency than karate equivalent mass. Their tendon," she gestured at Chun with one secondary limb, "store and release elastic energy at rates we associate with specialized jumpers, not endurance species. And their skeletal structure," another gesture, this one bordering on accusatory, "uses a calcium phosphate composite that achieves compressive strength ratings we need alloys to match." "They're small," Kresh protested weakly. "They're dense," Ixa corrected. "Phenomenally, absurdly dense. We're talking about a species that evolved under 1.0 gravity." She paused, letting that number hang in the air like an undetonated munition. "Does anyone here actually understand what that means?" Silence. Rex knew, intellectually, that Earth registered higher on the gravity index than most coalition homeworlds. He'd simply never considered the implications beyond noting that humans required less environmental adjustment on deployment. This assembly ground, Ixa continued, warming to her subject with the enthusiasm scientists reserve for proving themselves correct after extended periods of being ignored, is calibrated to .78 standard, comfortable for most coalition species. For her, the tablet gestured again at Chun, it's like you're all performing your feats of strength underwater while she's operating in atmosphere. That's oversimplified, Chun interjected, but directionally accurate. 3 months ago, Ixa said, compound eyes swiveling to address the broader crowd, I observed a human dock worker civilian contractor, not military move a cargo container that required 3 of my kind using powered assistance. I filed a report. It was categorized as clerical error. Her tone suggested opinions about that categorization. 2 months ago, I reviewed human medical records from the Tarsus boarding action. Sustained combat effectiveness in conditions that should have induced muscle failure in standard species within minutes. Another report. Dismissed as statistical anomaly. Vrex felt something cold settling in his primary stomach. How many reports? 17. Would you like me to enumerate them chronologically or by severity of ignored warning signs? The Tarsus action, Torvin said slowly. The human teams were assigned rear security. Because someone assumed we couldn't handle frontline insertion, Chin said, her tone carefully neutral. We didn't argue. Rear security needed doing, and arguing about assignments is a waste of everyone's time. Show me, Vrex said to Ixith, the strength differential. Quantify it. The Syndrel's mandibles worked in patterns Vrex had learned to associate with satisfaction. She manipulated her tablet, projecting data into the air between them comparative muscle fiber analyses, skeletal density measurements, tendon elasticity coefficients. The numbers painted a picture Vrex found increasingly uncomfortable. Here's a simple version. Ixith said, place a karate and a human of equivalent body mass in identical gravitational conditions. The human will, on average, generate 40% more force in explosive movements and demonstrate 60% greater endurance under sustained load. But we're larger, Kresh said, grasping at the obvious counterargument. You are, Chin agreed, which means you're carrying more mass. Your frame is optimized for .65 gravity. Mine is optimized for 1.0. The extra muscle required to move your larger skeleton in your native environment doesn't translate to proportional advantage in varied conditions. She shrugged. Basic physics. Your species builds tall. Mine builds efficient. Vrex watched her, reassessing. The compact frame he dismissed as weakness was, in fact, exactly the opposite evolutionary optimization for a hostile environment. Every kilogram of muscle served a purpose. No wasted mass. No structural inefficiency. Demonstrate again, he said, with additional weight. Chin raised an eyebrow. How much additional? Double it. Kresh made a strangled sound. General, that's 1,200 pounds, Chin said, cutting him off. She considered for a moment. Doable, but I'll need a proper bar and plates. That armor isn't balanced for overhead work. 10 minutes later, they'd assembled a makeshift deadlift station, using cargo containers and loading equipment. 1,200 pounds of mass locked onto a reinforced bar. Chin approached it the way Vrex approached tactical briefings methodically, without ceremony. She gripped the bar, breathed once, lifted. The weight rose smoothly, her form textbook perfect back straight. Power generated from legs and hips, the bar traveling a vertical line that would have satisfied any physics instructor. At the top, she locked out completely, holding the position while Ixith's tablet recorded. Biometric data. Then she lowered it with control, set it down without dropping it, and stepped back. Earth gravity, she said conversationally, is 9.8 meters per second squared. Standard coalition reference is 8.5. We grow up carrying 20% more weight just existing. She rolled her shoulders again, that same loosening motion. You get used to it. Makes everywhere else feel like vacation. Vrex stared at the bar, at the weights, at the human who just treated 1,200 pounds like a training exercise. Around him, the crowd had gone quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, less shocked, more calculating. How many humans are deployed with the joint operation? He asked. 47, Chin said. Various specialties. Coordination, logistics, technical support. Her tone suggested irony. Rear security. And their physical capabilities? Vary by individual, obviously. But we all pass the same basic standards before deployment. She smiled that predatory smile again. The standards you assumed were clerical errors. Vrex looked at Ixith. Your recommendation? The Syndrel's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or resignation. Stop letting them volunteer for support roles without asking why they keep volunteering for support roles. In the distance, someone dropped something metallic. The clang echoed across the parade ground like punctuation. Vrex's command chamber smelled of recycled air and the particular brand of anxiety that came from reviewing intelligence you previously deemed irrelevant. The holographic display cycled through footage a staff had compiled over the past 4 hours, every recorded instance of human personnel in combat operations, logged, and then promptly filed under liaison activities. Because no one had bothered to watch them, he was watching them now. Timestamp 1472, his intelligence officer, Rolf, said from across the table. The Veskian's chromatophores had shifted to muddy browns, which meant stress. Human boarding team. Kepler Station crisis. Watch the breach entry. Vrex watched. 3 humans in light armor hit the compromised airlock, moving in a pattern that looked choreographed until you realized it was reactive, each one covering angles before threats emerged, weapons tracking with precision that suggested they'd already calculated trajectories. One of them male. Compact even by human standards, physically tore a jammed hatch open with his hands, the metal shrieking as it deformed. We attributed that to mechanical failure in the hatch mechanism, Rolf said. His skin flashed orange, which Vrex had learned meant bitter amusement. The maintenance logs showed the hatch was functioning perfectly. He just bent it. Next clip, Vrex said, his voice flat. The display shifted. Hand-to-hand combat this time. A human female different from Chun, taller, engaging a Kresh pirate in what should have been a catastrophically mismatched fight. The Kresh had reach, mass, and natural armor plating. The human had technique, and an apparent willingness to get hurt if it meant winning. She took a blow that would have shattered Vrex's chitin, barely flinched, and responded by doing something creative and horrifying to the pirate's primary knee joint. Combat duration? Vrex asked. 11 seconds, Rolf said. Average human close quarters engagement time is 18 seconds. Coalition average is 43. The Kresh, specifically, average 52 seconds when they bother engaging instead of retreating. Vrex pulled up another file, this one statistical rather than visual. Human casualty rates across the last 2 years of joint operations. The numbers were wrong. Too low. Humans deployed into hazardous environments showed mortality rates 30% below coalition averages, and injury recovery times that suggested either advanced medical technology or biological advantages no one had properly documented. The medical data, he said, Ixitha's reports. Someone buried them deliberately? Not deliberately, Rolf corrected, his chromatophores rippling uncertainty. Systematically. Every species views a coalition through their own physiological baseline. When human performance metrics appeared as outliers, they were flagged as data corruption or clerical errors. No one questioned it because no one expected a species that small perform that well. Someone should have questioned it. You didn't, Rolf said, with the bluntness afforded to officers who'd served together through enough crises to earn honesty. None of us did. We saw them accept support assignments and assumed it meant they lacked frontline capability. Vrex pulled up another file human training documentation, the kind of dry operation material that usually read like specifications for cargo containers. This read like a philosophical treatise on controlled suffering. Embrace the suck, he read aloud. What does that even mean? It's a doctrinal concept, Rolf explained, his skin shifting through several colors before settling on resigned gray. Near as we can translate it, accepting discomfort as baseline rather than exception. Their training methodologies deliberately induce stress, fatigue, and pain to establish psychological resilience. He paused. They have a phrase, comfortable being uncomfortable. It's not metaphorical. They mean it literally. Vrex scanned through the training protocols. Sustained operations in hostile environments, sleep deprivation exercises, pain tolerance conditioning. The kind of preparation you'd expect from a species that evolved dodging apex predators, not one that supposedly achieved civilization through cooperation and tool use. Pull up their evolutionary history, he said. Rolf's expression suggested he'd been dreading that request. The display shifted to anthropological data, Earth's biosphere, human evolutionary timeline, the cheerful little horror show of natural selection at 1.0 gravity. Megafauna extinctions coinciding with human expansion. Persistence hunting literally running prey animals to exhaustion over distances that would kill most coalition species. Endurance capabilities that classified them as outliers among their own planet's predators. And the gravity, always the gravity, that invisible weight pressing down on everything that lived there, shaping bones and sinew and cardiovascular systems into configurations optimized for a world that actively tried to crush its inhabitants. Their pursuit predators, Rex said, the words tasting strange in his mouth. Coalition species had predators among their ancestors, certainly, but most had transitioned to ambush or pack tactics. Humans apparently just chased things until those things fell over. Rawl corrected, 10,000 years ago. Now they're whatever they need to be. His chromatophores flickered nervous yellow. That's what concerns me, General. Adaptability as primary survival trait. Rex closed that file and opened another human strategic deployments across coalition operations. The pattern became visible once you knew to look for it. Humans volunteering for environmental extremes, high-gravity insertions, extended duration operations, hazardous boarding actions. Every assignment that other species declined or rotated out of quickly, humans accepted and maintained indefinitely. They've been building a reputation, Rex said slowly. Reliable, undemanding, willing to take the assignments no one wants. While learning every aspect of our operational doctrine, command structure, and tactical capabilities, Rolf finished, from the inside, without anyone questioning why they were so interested in observing. A younger officer, Thess, newly promoted and still naive enough to voice uncomfortable questions, spoke from a doorway. Permission to speak, General? Rex gestured assent. What if they've been letting us think we're in charge? The silence that followed had weight to it, pressing down like Earth's gravity. Rex found himself reviewing the past 2 years of joint operations through that lens, and every interaction suddenly looked different. Humans accepting support roles. Humans volunteering for liaison positions. Humans watching, learning, adapting, and never once insisting on recognition for capabilities that would have radically altered their status in the coalition hierarchy. Strategic patience, Rex said. They're playing a longer game. Or they genuinely don't care about status, Rolf offered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Their culture materials emphasize collective success over individual recognition. Maybe they're simply being cooperative. Watch this, Thess said, stepping forward to manipulate the display. Footage from parade ground appeared chin lifting Vrex's ancestral armor one-handed. Watch her eyes. She's not looking at the armor. She's scanning the crowd, cataloging reactions, recording who's surprised, who's skeptical, who's recalculating. Rex watched. The younger officer was right. Chen's expression throughout the demonstration hadn't been one of effort or triumph. It had been observational, clinical. She'd been collecting data, while everyone else focused on the spectacle. How many other human personnel are embedded in coalition command structures? Rex asked. Rolf pulled up a star chart. Red markers bloomed across it like infection spreading. 417 across 82 coalition vessels and installations, all in support coordination or liaison roles, all with full access to strategic planning and operational intelligence. And we gave them that access because we thought they were harmless. We gave them that access, Rolf corrected quietly, because they were helpful, efficient, unervingly good at anticipating logistical needs. No one questions an assistant who makes their job easier. Vrex stared at the star chart, at the red markers that suddenly looked less like coalition assets and more like pieces positioned on a strategy board. 417 humans, embedded throughout command structures, observing and learning and waiting for something Vrex couldn't quite identify. The joint operation launches in 6 days, he said. Combat deployment against entrenched hostiles. What are the environmental parameters for the target installation? Rolf checked his files, and Vrex watched the Veskians' chromatophores cycle through several colors before settling on alarmed purple. High gravity sections throughout, Rolf said. 0.9 to 1.2 standard. We've been planning on power-assisted combat suits for primary assault teams. He paused. The humans volunteered for rear guard positions. Again. Of course they did, Vrex said. Cancel those assignments. I want human personnel distributed throughout primary assault elements, integrated fully, not segregated to support roles. General, if they've been hiding their capabilities, let's see what they can actually do when we stop assuming they're fragile. Vrex closed the files, the holographic display winking out and leaving the command chamber in dim lighting. And if they've been positioning themselves strategically, I want them where I can watch them, closely. Thess shifted uncomfortably. What if we're wrong? What if they're genuinely just cooperative? Vrex thought about Chen's predatory smile, about humans accepting thankless assignments for 2 years without complaint, about training doctrine built around embracing suffering as strategy. Then we'll have excellent soldiers in positions they're overqualified for, he said. But I don't think we're wrong. In the darkness of the command chamber, surrounded by data that told a story everyone had been too blind to read, Vrex discovered what it felt like to realize you'd been outmaneuvered by an opponent you hadn't known you were facing. The derelict vessel hung in space like a monument to bad decisions, its hull breached in 17 places, and its interior a labyrinth of compromised sections where hostiles had entrenched themselves with the stubbornness of parasites. Intelligence suggested 47 enemy combatants' heavy weapons, and a willingness to die rather than surrender. Standard operation, really, except for the part where the ship's artificial gravity had malfunctioned into random pockets of crushing weight. Vrex watched the tactical display from the command deck of his flagship, monitoring assault team positions as they prepared for breach. He'd restructured the entire deployment over the past 6 days, integrating human personnel into primary elements despite protests from 3 separate commanders who'd cited equipment incompatibility and coordination concerns. What they'd meant, Vrex knew, was that they didn't want small, fragile humans slowing down their elite troops. He'd overridden them anyway. Team 7 reporting ready, the comm officer announced. Experiencing hesitation from Commander Thex regarding high-gravity insertion point Delta. Vrex opened the command channel. Thex status? The karate commander's voice came through strained. General, Delta section is registering 1.4 standard gravity. My troops are already carrying 60 kilograms of equipment. The additional weight will severely compromise combat effectiveness. Understood. Human element in your team? A pause, longer than tactical considerations warranted. For personnel, yes, sir. Their assessment of Delta section? Another pause, then a different voice, female, with that distinctively level human cadence. Feels like home, Commander. We can take point if you prefer. That won't, Dex started, then stopped. Vrex could imagine the commander's expression, recalculating, remembering footage from the parade ground, and perhaps wondering what else he'd been wrong about. Stand by. The operation launched with a coordinated chaos that characterized military actions galaxy-wide multiple breach points, simultaneous entry, overwhelming force applied to vulnerable positions. Vrex tracked team movements through helmet cam feeds and biometric data, watching as coalition forces pushed into the derelict's outer sections. Team 7 hit Delta section, and Vrex immediately saw the problem. The high gravity turned movement into labor, each step requiring conscious effort. Karate troops advanced in power-assisted armor that whined under the strain, their formation spreading as individuals struggled with the environment. The humans moved like they'd been poured into the space, fluid and unbothered. One of them male, built like condensed violence, took point position and advanced at a pace that forced karate to push harder just to keep formation. When hostiles opened fire from an entrenched position, he didn't hunker down behind cover. He sprinted toward them, closing distance in a straight line that defied tactical doctrine and apparently physics, weapon tracking targets while his body absorbed recoil that should have staggered him. Hostile position neutralized, came the report, professional and understated. Continuing advance. Vrex switched between camera feeds, watching similar scenarios unfold across multiple teams. In Section Gamma, a human female cleared a compartment by herself while her Veskian squad mates provided covering fire, her movements economical and brutal. In Section Echo, 2 humans extracted a wounded Thovian through a collapsed corridor that measured 1.2 gravity, carrying the injured soldier's mass without apparent strain, while the rest of the team struggled to move their own weight. Team 3 requesting backup in Beta Section. The comm officer reported, "Heavy resistance, casualties mounting." "Divert Team 7, Vrex ordered, "tracking positions. They're closest and ahead of schedule." "Team 7 is in high-gravity sectors, sir. Response time will be acceptable. Route them through Section Delta 9. Delta 9 registered 1.5 standard gravity. Vrex watched Thex's biometrics spike with stress as the team repositioned, the karate warriors pushing their armor's assist systems to maximum output. The humans maintained their pace effortlessly, and when they hit Beta Section where gravity mercifully dropped to 0.9 standard, they accelerated past the rest of the team and hit the hostile position, like a tactical problem demanding immediate solution. The engagement lasted 40 seconds. When it ended, 3 hostiles were dead, 2 were incapacitated, and the humans were already securing the wounded from Team 3. Vrex opened a private channel to Thex. "Commander, honest assessment." "There." Thex struggled for words, breathing heavily despite his armor's respiratory assist. "General, they're operating at efficiency levels that shouldn't be possible in these conditions. One of them just carried a karate soldier full armor, call it 200 kilograms total, through a high-gravity section while returning fire. I don't know how to incorporate that into tactical doctrine." "Figure it out," Vrex said, "and stop trying to protect them. They don't need it." The operation continued for another 73 minutes, a grinding advance through compromised sections and desperate last stands. Vrex watched humans work throughout, and a pattern emerged that was somehow more disturbing than their raw physical capabilities. They didn't just endure the harsh conditions, they thrived in them, moved through them with the ease of species operating in preferred environments. When other troops flagged under sustained combat stress, human biometrics remained steady. When complex tactical situations demanded rapid adaptation, humans adjusted faster. And they never complained. Not once. Not about the gravity, the environment, the casualties, or the extended engagement time. They simply continued operating with mechanical efficiency that would have seemed inhuman, except that it was, in fact, the opposite, profoundly, terrifyingly human. When the derelict was finally secured, Vrex reviewed the casualty reports. Coalition forces, 17 wounded, 3 critical, 1 fatality. Human forces, 5 wounded, none critical, 0 fatalities. The humans had been deployed into the worst sections, faced the heaviest resistance, and come out with the lowest casualty rate. He found Chun in the flagship's medical bay, supervising the treatment of wounded karate soldiers. She'd taken a glancing hit across her left arm, the kind of injury that would have sent most species into shock. She'd apparently sealed it with medical adhesive and continued operating for another hour. "Liaison officer," Vrex said, the title tasting sardonic in his mouth now. She turned, snapped off a salute that suggested she was humoring him. "General, operation successful. Minimal casualties. Target secured ahead of schedule. Your people performed admirably. They did their jobs." She paused. "As did yours." Commander Thex adapted well once he stopped trying to accommodate our supposed limitations. Vrex studied her, this compact predator, wearing a support officer's uniform like camouflage. "How many were kinda like you?" Chun tilted her head, and he recognized the expression, now calculation, wrapped in courtesy. "General, I'm a logistics coordinator. I push data and coordinate supply chains. I haven't qualified for combat operations in 3 years." She smiled, and there was nothing reassuring about it. "You haven't met our soldiers yet." The words hit like decompression, sudden and total. Vrex had restructured his entire tactical understanding around human capabilities, had watched them outperform elite troops in the worst possible conditions, and Chin was implying that these were the clerks, the administrators, the support staff. Your actual combat specialists he started are deployed elsewhere, do what they do best. She checked her data tablet. That casual gesture humans use when delivering information they wanted to seem offhand. Earth maintains expeditionary forces across 47 systems at present. Coalition operations represent approximately 12% of our deployed personnel. The rest are... She paused, selecting words carefully, addressing situations that require specialist attention. What kind of situations? The kind where other species request assistance handling problems they prefer not to handle themselves. Her tone remained professionally neutral. Hazardous environments, hostile boardings, extended operations in conditions most species find prohibitively dangerous. We've developed something of a reputation for taking contracts no one else wants. Vrex understood then, with the clarity of tactical revelation, what humans had been doing for 2 years. They hadn't been positioning themselves within coalition command structures out of ambition or conquest. They'd been establishing proof of concept, demonstrating reliability, building trust, showing that humans could operate effectively in environments that broke other species, and doing it without demanding recognition or status adjustments that would have triggered threat assessment protocols. Strategic patience, long-term planning, the willingness to accept subordinate positions while quietly demonstrating superiority, waiting for everyone else to reach the obvious conclusion without being forced to it. You've been letting us think we were in charge, Vrex said quietly. You are in charge, Chin corrected. Of coalition operations, coalition resources, coalition doctrine. We're just here to help. She met his eyes directly, and there was nothing submissive in her gaze. But if you're asking whether we've been carefully documenting which species work well under pressure, which adapt quickly to new tactical requirements, and which ones might make good partners for more challenging operations, she shrugged. Well, that's just being thorough. In the medical bay, a karate soldier groaned as sedatives took effect. Human medical staff moved between beds with quiet efficiency, treating coalition casualties with the same care they'd shown their own. Helpful, cooperative, unervingly competent. Vrex thought about 417 humans embedded throughout coalition structures. He thought about Earth's expeditionary forces deployed across 47 systems. He thought about a species that had evolved under crushing gravity, developed persistence hunting as survival strategy, and built an entire military doctrine around being comfortable in conditions that destroyed everyone else. The humans who were assigned to rear security on the Tarsus operation, he said. That was deliberate, wasn't it? You wanted that assignment. Rear security needed doing, Chin said, and it gave us excellent observation positions to assess how different species handle sustained combat stress. Very educational. She glanced at her tablet again. We filed comprehensive reports. I believe they were categorized as clerical errors. They were... What a shame, Chin said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Good intelligence, wasted. Though I suppose it worked out gave us more time to observe before anyone started asking uncomfortable questions. And now we're asking those questions. Now you're asking those questions, she agreed, which suggests you're ready for more honest conversations about partnership structures. That's progress, General. We appreciate progress. Vrex realized he was being managed, and realized further that Chin knew he knew and didn't particularly care. The power dynamic had shifted so far from where he'd assumed it was that recalibration seemed pointless. Humans had been playing a different game entirely, one with longer timelines and strategic patience measured in years rather than engagements. What do you want? He asked finally, cutting through the diplomatic choreography to the question that mattered. Chun considered for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Right now? Continued partnership with coalition species who've demonstrated they can adapt, learn, and work effectively under pressure. Your people did well today, General. Commander Thex especially, he adjusted his tactical doctrine in real time when confronted with new information. That's valuable. That's the kind of flexibility we look for in long-term collaborations. And species who can adapt? We'll continue receiving support and coordination from our liaison personnel, Chin said pleasantly. Just like always, we're very good at support roles. Outside the medical bay's viewports, the derelict vessel hung in space, secured and silent. Inside, humans and coalition forces worked side by side, treating wounds and processing casualties, and beginning the long bureaucratic aftermath that followed every military operation. It looked like cooperation. It probably was cooperation. But Vrex couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in data files he'd never see, humans were taking notes, documenting which species had potential and which had reached their ceiling, building assessments that would inform decisions he wouldn't be part of making. The humans had been watching all along, patient as pursuit predators, and they'd learned everything they needed to know, while everyone else learned almost nothing about them. That, Vrex decided, was a truly terrifying part. Not their strength or endurance or casual competence in conditions that shattered other species. The scary part was the strategic thinking behind it, the willingness to accept underestimation as advantage, to volunteer for thankless positions while gathering intelligence, to wait years for the rest of the galaxy to catch up to conclusions humans had already reached. Chun checked her tablet one final time, then looked up at him with that professional smile. "Will there be anything else, General? I should coordinate the medical supply redistribution." "No," Vrex said. "Dismissed." She saluted again, that same humoring gesture, and walked away to do the job everyone had assumed was the limit of her capabilities. Vrex watched her go, and wondered what other limits everyone had been wrong about. Retry, Claude. Can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.